I slapped a business card on that marble dinner table and watched their faces drain of color. $10 million. That's what they wanted from me. The poor old woman they'd been mocking all evening. My name is Deborah. I'm 68 years old, and that night in Beverly Hills, I was wearing a $15 cardigan from a thrift store, sitting across from people who thought I was nobody. But here's what they didn't know. I own $10 million worth of prime real estate, and the land they'd been desperately trying to buy for months, that was mine. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with revenge. It starts with a mother's worry. My son Josh called me 3 months before that dinner. He was excited, nervous, talking fast the way he does when something big is happening. "Mom, I met someone. Her name is Amelia Henderson. I think she's the one." I was happy for him. Of course I was. Josh is 32, successful, kind-hearted. He deserved love. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Her family's, well, they're wealthy, Mom. Like, really wealthy. New money. Real estate developers. They have a mansion in Beverly Hills." "That's nice, honey," I said carefully. "Yeah, but Mom, I need to warn you. They judge people. By money, by status, by what you drive and where you live and what you wear." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. See, I've spent my whole life being deliberately invisible. After my husband died 20 years ago, I inherited his commercial real estate portfolio, land holdings, commercial properties, assets hidden behind trusts and LLCs with names like Evergreen Land Trust and Horizon Property Holdings. On paper, I'm worth millions. In person, I drive a 2008 Toyota Camry with a dent in the bumper. I shop at Target. I volunteer at the local library 3 days a week. I live in the same modest house I've lived in for 30 years. Why? Because I learned early that visible wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. Scammers, gold diggers, people who see dollar signs instead of human beings. But my son's warning planted a seed. If this family judged people by their bank accounts, I needed to know exactly who my son was marrying into. So I made a decision, a test. Maybe a little cruel, but absolutely necessary. I would meet the Hendersons. But not as Deborah Mitchell, wealthy widow and property owner. No, I'd meet them as the poorest version of myself I could create. The broke mother-in-law living on a tiny Social Security check, and I'd watch how they treated me. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I went to Goodwill and bought the oldest, most worn-out clothes I could find. A faded floral dress that looked like it was from 1987, a cardigan with pills on the sleeves, sensible shoes that had seen better days. I practiced my persona, the sweet, slightly confused elderly woman who didn't quite understand modern life, who talked too much about coupons and early bird specials, who apologized for everything. Josh called the week before the dinner, sounding anxious. "Mom, they want to meet you. Dinner at their place next Friday. Is that okay?" "Of course, sweetheart. I'm looking forward to it." "Mom, I just want you to be yourself. Don't worry about impressing them." If only he knew. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked fragile, ordinary, forgettable. Someone you'd walk past on the street without a second glance. Perfect. I got in my old Camry, which I'd deliberately left unwashed for a week, and drove to Beverly Hills. The closer I got, the bigger the houses became. Mansions behind gates, manicured lawns, cars that cost more than most people's homes. And then I saw it, the Henderson estate, a modern monstrosity of glass and white stone that screamed, "Look at me." I pulled into the circular driveway, parking my beat-up Toyota next to a Mercedes, a Porsche, and what looked like a Bentley. The contrast was, well, it was exactly what I wanted. I grabbed my worn purse, real leather but 30 years old, and walked to the front door. It opened before I could knock. Mrs. Henderson stood there in a designer dress that probably cost $5,000. Her face stretched tight from cosmetic procedures, her smile as fake as her eyelashes. "Oh, you must be Josh's mother. Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you found the place." "Found the place? Lady, I've been navigating this city since before you were born." But I smiled my most helpless smile. Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely home." She looked me up and down, one quick dismissive scan that cataloged every cheap item I was wearing. I saw the judgment flash across her face before she hid it behind that plastic smile. "Please come in. Let me have our housekeeper take your jacket." She said jacket the way you'd say biohazard, like my thrift store cardigan might contaminate her pristine home. The housekeeper, a kind-looking woman who gave me a sympathetic smile, carefully took my cardigan like it was made of glass, or maybe like it might fall apart in her hands. And that's when I knew this was going to be even worse than I thought, but it was also going to be incredibly satisfying. You ever walk into a room and immediately feel like you're an exhibit at a zoo? That's what the Henderson mansion felt like. Mrs. Henderson led me through their foyer, all white marble and modern art that probably cost more than most people's yearly salary, and into a living room that looked like it had never been lived in. Everything was white. White couches, white rugs, white walls, like stepping into a minimalist's fever dream. "Please, sit anywhere," Mrs. Henderson gestured with her perfectly manicured hand. I sat gingerly on the edge of a white sofa, clutching my old purse like it was a life preserver. I made sure to look uncomfortable, out of place, like I was afraid I might break something just by breathing wrong. Mr. Henderson walked in next, tall, tan, with that specific kind of confidence that comes from never being told no in your entire life. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, or at least more than what he thought my grocery bill was. "Ah, Mrs. Mitchell, pleasure to meet you." He shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that was supposed to impress. "Can I get you something to drink? We have an excellent Chateau Margaux breathing, or if you prefer something simpler." Simpler. Translation? Cheaper, because obviously I wouldn't appreciate good wine. "Oh, just water would be lovely, thank you," I said, adding a little tremor to my voice. I'm not much of a drinker anymore. It upsets my stomach. I saw Mrs. Henderson and her husband exchange a look, the kind of look that said everything without saying anything. The, "Oh God, Josh's mother is going to be a burden" look. Josh arrived a few minutes later with Amelia. My son looked handsome in a button-down shirt, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was nervous, worried about how this night would go. Amelia was beautiful in that particular Beverly Hills way. Long hair with expensive highlights, perfect makeup, designer dress. She smiled at me, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell, so wonderful to finally meet you." "Oh, call me Deborah, dear. Mrs. Mitchell makes me feel ancient." I laughed, a little too loud, a little too long, just enough to seem slightly off. I saw Amelia's smile tighten. We sat down for dinner in a dining room that could have seated 20 people. The table was set with china so delicate I was afraid to touch it. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery that probably cost more than my car. Dinner was some kind of fussy French cuisine, tiny portions artfully arranged on huge plates, the kind of meal that looks beautiful but leaves you hungry. "So, Deborah," Mr. Henderson said, cutting into something that might have been duck, "Josh tells us you're a widow. My condolences. What did your husband do?" Here we go. "Oh, thank you. Yes, my Robert passed 20 years ago. He was in property management. Nothing fancy. We got by." "Property management. I see." Mr. Henderson nodded like he understood everything about me now. "And what do you do to keep busy these days?" "I volunteer at the library, 3 days a week. I just love being around books. And I do a bit of crafting, knitting mostly. Keeps the hands busy." Mrs. Henderson practically radiated pity. "That sounds quaint. Do you still work? For income, I mean?" "Oh, no, I'm retired. I live on Robert's Social Security. It's not much, but I manage. I'm very careful with coupons." I saw Josh wince. He knew I was uncomfortable talking about money, or so he thought. Really, I was enjoying every second of this performance. "That must be difficult," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Living on a fixed income in this economy, you must worry constantly about making ends meet." "Oh, I do. Just last week I had to decide between buying the name brand cereal or the store brand. I went with the store brand. Tastes almost the same." The silence at that table was delicious. You could practically hear them thinking, "Josh is marrying into this?" Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Well, the important thing is that you're managing. And of course, once Josh and Amelia are married, I'm sure they'll be able to help you out if you need anything." Help me out, like I was a charity case. "That's so kind," I said, putting my hand over my heart. "You're raising such a generous daughter." The conversation shifted, and that's when things got really interesting. Mr. Henderson started talking about his business, real estate development, big projects, luxury condos, commercial spaces. "We're currently working on our largest project yet," he said, puffing up with pride. "A mixed-use development right on the edge of the national park. Luxury retail, high-end residences. It's going to be a landmark." "How exciting," I said, playing dumb. "It would be," he said, his voice turning sour, "if we could acquire the last piece of land we need. There's one parcel absolutely crucial to the project, and the owner won't sell." My heart started beating faster. I knew exactly what land he was talking about. "Who owns it?" Mrs. Henderson asked her husband, even though I'm sure she already knew. "Some anonymous trust. They hide behind lawyers and LLC paperwork. Won't even meet with us. We've offered $10 million, well above market value, and they won't budge." $10 million. That was my land. The Old Willow parcel, we called it in the family. Prime location right at the park boundary. I'd been holding on to it for 15 years, waiting for the right moment. "Can you imagine?" Mr. Henderson continued, getting worked up. "Someone so stupid and stubborn they'd turn down $10 million. They're probably some old fool who doesn't understand the value of money." I took a sip of water to hide my smile. Old fool. If only he knew. You know what's fascinating about wealthy people who've never struggled? They think being rich makes them superior. Not just financially, morally, intellectually, in every possible way. The Hendersons were textbook cases. As dinner progressed, the insults got less subtle. They didn't even realize they were doing it. That's the really remarkable part. They genuinely believed they were being kind to the poor, unfortunate woman at their table. Mrs. Henderson turned to me with that concerned look wealthy women perfect in their charity board meetings. "Deborah, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but have you thought about your long-term financial planning? At your age, with limited resources—" "Oh, I try not to think about it too much," I said, making my voice quaver slightly. "What will be, you know?" She exchanged another look with her husband, the "she has no plan" look. "Well, you really should consult with a financial advisor. Of course, that costs money you might not have, but there are some free community resources. I could get you some information?" "That would be so helpful, dear." Josh looked miserable. He was picking at his food, barely participating in the conversation. I wanted to reach across the table and squeeze his hand, tell him it was okay, that this was all part of my plan. But I couldn't break character. Amelia, to her credit, seemed a bit uncomfortable too. She kept glancing at her parents like she wished they'd stop, but she didn't say anything. Complicit through silence. That's what my Robert used to call it. Mr. Henderson launched into a story about his latest luxury car purchase. Apparently, he'd bought a limited edition Porsche for $300,000. "I know it's extravagant," he said, not sounding remotely apologetic, "but life's too short not to enjoy the fruits of your success, right?" "Absolutely," I agreed enthusiastically. "I feel the same way about my car." Everyone turned to look at me. "My Toyota has 180,000 miles on it now. Still runs. I call that success." The silence was excruciating. Beautiful, but excruciating. Mrs. Henderson actually laughed, this nervous tinkling sound. "Well, yes, I suppose that's one way to look at it." Then she turned back to Josh. "Josh, sweetie, maybe after the wedding, you and Amelia could help your mother get something more reliable? We wouldn't want her breaking down on the highway somewhere." "Mom's car is fine," Josh said a bit defensively. Of course," Mr. Henderson said, waving his hand dismissively. "But your mother is getting older. These are things to think about. When you marry into a family, you take on certain responsibilities." Responsibilities. like I was a burden they were accepting along with their daughter's marriage. The main course ended, and we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. That's when Mrs. Henderson really showed her colors. We were sitting on those uncomfortable white couches, and she leaned forward with this conspiratorial expression. "Deborah, can I be honest with you, mother to mother?" "Of course, dear." "I think it's wonderful that Josh wants to marry Amelia, but I want to make sure you understand. Our family operates at a certain level. There will be social events, fundraisers, galas, the kind of things that require, well, a certain presentation." I blinked at her innocently. "I love a good party." "Yes, but these aren't casual parties. They're black tie affairs, designer gowns, people who matter. And I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that, because we wouldn't want you to feel out of place. Translation? We don't want you to embarrass us." "Oh, I understand completely," I said. "I wouldn't want to cause any trouble. Maybe I could just skip those events, stay home with a good book?" "That might be for the best," Mrs. Henderson said, relief washing over her face. "Just until you're more acclimated to our world." Our world, like they lived in some separate dimension from us peasants. Mr. Henderson joined in. "The important thing is that Josh and Amelia are happy. And of course, we'll make sure you're taken care of, Deborah. I've already told Josh that we'd be happy to set up a small monthly stipend for you, just to help with expenses." A stipend? They wanted to pay me an allowance like I was a child. "That's incredibly generous," I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. "I don't know what to say." "No need to say anything," he replied magnanimously. "Family takes care of family." I almost broke character right then, almost told them exactly what they could do with their stipend. But I held it together, because the night was about to get so much better. The conversation turned back to Mr. Henderson's real estate woes. He couldn't help himself. Successful men love to talk about their problems, especially when they think everyone in the room is too stupid to understand them. "This mystery landowner is killing us," he complained. "The entire project hinges on that one parcel. Without it, we can't get the proper road access, can't get the utility easements we need. The whole thing falls apart." "Have you tried offering more money?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "We're already at $10 million. That's 20% above fair market value. Anyone with half a brain would take that deal immediately." "Maybe they're sentimental about the land?" Amelia suggested quietly. Mr. Henderson snorted. "Sentimental? It's a business asset. You don't hold on to business assets for sentimental reasons. You sell them to the highest bidder and move on. That's how wealth is built." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing, but inside I was smiling, because they were talking about my land, my decision, my stupidity. And soon, very soon, they were going to find out exactly how stupid I wasn't. There's a moment in every con when you know it's time to drop the act, when you've gathered all the information you need, seen every ugly truth, and there's nothing left to discover. For me, that moment came when Mrs. Henderson suggested I might be too old and confused to manage my own finances. We'd moved back to the dinner table for dessert, some ridiculous deconstructed cheesecake that looked like modern art and tasted like disappointment. Mr. Henderson was still ranting about the mystery landowner, getting himself more worked up with every word. "I've dealt with stubborn sellers before," he was saying, "but this is next-level stupidity. They're costing themselves millions in opportunity. The land is just sitting there doing nothing. We could turn it into something spectacular, something profitable." "Maybe they don't care about profit," Josh said quietly. His future father-in-law looked at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. "Everyone cares about profit, son. That's how the world works." "Unless you're too senile to understand what you own," Mrs. Henderson added, laughing. "For all we know, it's some confused elderly person who doesn't even remember they own the land." And there it was, the final insult. I set my fork down carefully, deliberately. The movement was small, but somehow it caught everyone's attention. The conversation died as they all turned to look at me. I'd been playing the confused elderly woman all night, smiling too much, laughing too loud, agreeing with everything, making myself small and harmless and forgettable. But now Now I let that mask slip away. I looked up, and instead of the helpless expression I'd been wearing, my face was calm, composed, the expression of someone who's been in charge of multi-million-dollar decisions for 20 years. "Tell me something, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice different now, clearer, sharper, with none of that trembling uncertainty. "This land you're so desperate to buy, the one near the national park, would that be the parcel they call Old Willow? The one with the creek running through the northwest corner?" The table went silent. Mr. Henderson stared at me, confusion flickering across his face. Yes. How did you know that? And you said you're offering $10 million? Yes, but I don't understand. That's actually a fair price, I continued as if he hadn't spoken. The land is 47 acres, prime location, perfect for development. $10 million is reasonable, maybe even generous given the zoning complications. Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about zoning complications?" I smiled. Not the helpless, apologetic smile I'd been giving them all night. This was something else entirely, something that made them all sit up a little straighter. "Because I've owned that land for 15 years. You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you could have heard a pin thinking about dropping. Josh's mouth fell open. "Mom?" "The Old Willow parcel," I continued, enjoying every second of their stunned expressions, "is held by the Evergreen Land Trust, an anonymous LLC that manages several of my commercial properties. You've been trying to buy my land for 6 months, Mr. Henderson." Mr. Henderson's face went through several shades of red. That's impossible. You drive a Toyota. You clip coupons. You said you live on Social Security." "I said I live carefully. I never said I live poorly." I reached into my worn purse, vintage Louis Vuitton actually from 1992, but they'd been too busy judging the age to recognize the brand, and pulled out a business card. Not my personal card, my business card. I slid it across the table to Mr. Henderson. "Deborah Mitchell, Principal, Evergreen Land Trust, managing assets in excess of $15 million. The card sat there between us like a bomb that had just gone off. Mrs. Henderson found her voice first. "This is some kind of joke." "No joke. I've been managing my late husband's commercial real estate portfolio for 2 decades. The Old Willow parcel is just one of several properties I own in this area. I also own the industrial complex on Madison Street, the retail center on Harbor Boulevard, and about 40% of the commercial land in the downtown historic district." Amelia looked like she might be sick. Josh was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, pride, maybe a little anger at being kept in the dark. But the Hendersons? They were pure panic. "You've been lying to us," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice shaking. "No more than you've been lying to yourselves. I didn't say anything untrue tonight. I just let you make assumptions based on my car and my clothes and my age. You saw what you wanted to see, a poor, helpless old woman you could patronize and control." "But why?" Mr. Henderson demanded. "Why pretend? Why humiliate us like this?" "Humiliate you?" I let out a short laugh. "You humiliated yourselves. I wanted to know what kind of family my son was marrying into. I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you thought was beneath you, someone who couldn't do anything for you, someone who didn't matter in your world." I looked around the table at their stricken faces, "and you showed me exactly who you are." You want to know what's really interesting about confronting people with their own behavior? They never think they did anything wrong. They think they were being kind, charitable even. Mrs. Henderson was the first to try to recover. She straightened in her chair, put on her society smile, the one that's probably gotten her through 1,000 awkward charity events. "Now, Deborah, I think you're being rather unfair. We've been nothing but welcoming to you tonight." "Welcoming?" I interrupted. "You told me I should skip family events so I wouldn't embarrass you. You offered me a stipend like I was a charity case. You suggested I was too old and confused to manage my own money. That was meant to be helpful." "No, it was meant to be controlling. You wanted to establish dominance, to make sure I knew my place in your family hierarchy." Mr. Henderson stood up abruptly, his face red. "This is outrageous. You came into our home under false pretenses." "I came into your home as myself. I just didn't volunteer my bank balance. Funny how that changes everything, isn't it? We would have treated you the same regardless." "Would you?" I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward him. Here, this is one of my accounts, just one. See that balance? His eyes widened as he looked at the screen. 7 figures, and that was just my liquid cash account. That's, he trailed off, more than you have accessible, I'd wager. Most of your wealth is tied up in developments and properties you can't liquidate quickly. I know, because I've done my research on your company. Your leverage ratio is concerningly high. You're overextended on at least 3 projects. That's why you need the Old Willow parcel so desperately. Because if this development doesn't go through, you're going to have some very uncomfortable conversations with your creditors. The color drained from his face. How did you... Those are private business matters. Nothing's private if you know where to look. And I've been in commercial real estate for 20 years. I know how to read a balance sheet. I know how to spot someone who's mortgaged their future on a risky bet. Mrs. Henderson was gripping the edge of the table. You investigated us? The same way you would have investigated me if you'd thought I had anything worth investigating. The difference is, you assumed I was nobody, not worth the effort. Josh finally spoke. His voice was quiet, hurt. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I turned to my son, and my expression softened. This part, hurting him, hadn't been part of the plan, but it was necessary, because I needed to see them as they really are. If they'd known about my money, they would have put on a different show. They would have been charming and gracious and perfect, and you would have married into this family thinking they were good people. We are good people, Amelia said, speaking up for the first time in a while. Are you? You sat here all night listening to your parents insult my intelligence, my clothing, my life choices. You didn't say a single word in my defense. That's not goodness, sweetheart. That's complicity. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to keep the peace. By sacrificing my dignity? That's not a peace worth keeping. Mr. Henderson slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You've made your point. You're rich. Congratulations. You fooled us. Very clever. Now, can we discuss this land sale like rational adults? And there it was, the real reason he was upset. Not because they'd been cruel, not because they'd misjudged someone, but because they wanted something from me. And now they weren't going to get it. You think I'm going to sell to you now? I asked incredulously. We're offering $10 million. That's excellent money. I don't need your money, Mr. Henderson. I have plenty of my own. Then why are you holding on to it? Pure spite? No, strategy. That land is worth more if I wait. Your development would actually increase its value significantly. So I'll hold it for another 5 years, let you build around it, and then sell it to someone else for $15 million. His face turned purple. You can't do that. That's business? I thought you said everyone cares about profit. That's how the world works, remember? Mrs. Henderson stood up, her voice icy. Josh, I think it's time you and your mother left. Actually, I said, standing as well, I think it's time Josh reconsidered this entire relationship. Everyone started talking at once. Amelia was crying. Mrs. Henderson was shouting. Mr. Henderson was threatening legal action, though for what, I couldn't imagine. But I just looked at my son. Josh, come with me, please. He stood there, torn, looking between me and Amelia. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He loved her. I knew he did. But I also knew he couldn't unsee what had happened tonight. Josh, Amelia said, reaching for his hand, don't let her ruin this. We love each other. That's what matters. Is it? I asked softly. Josh, ask yourself, would she have loved you if I really was poor? Would her family have accepted you? Or would they have found a way to end this relationship before it got serious? The question hung in the air like smoke. Josh looked at Amelia, really looked at her. And I saw the moment he found his answer. I need to go, he said quietly. I need to think. Josh, please. I'll call you tomorrow. I need time. We walked out of that mansion together, leaving chaos behind us. The housekeeper handed me my thrift store cardigan with a small, knowing smile. She'd probably heard every word. In the car, Josh didn't speak for the first 5 miles. Then, finally, Mom, what the hell was that? That was me protecting you. By humiliating the woman I love? By showing you who she really is, who her family really is. Josh, they would have controlled your entire life, every decision, every friendship, every dollar you spent. Is that what you want? He didn't answer, but I knew the question would eat at him, and I knew eventually he'd find his answer. We drove in silence for 20 minutes before Josh finally spoke again. Did you really need to do it like that? Couldn't you have just talked to me about your concerns? I glanced at him, my son, 32 years old, but sometimes still so naive about how the world works. Would you have believed me? If I'd said, Josh, I think the Hendersons are shallow and materialistic, would you have listened? Or would you have told me I was being judgmental? He was quiet for a moment. Probably the second one. Exactly. People don't believe what you tell them. They believe what they see for themselves. We pulled into a small diner, one of those classic American places with red vinyl booths and bottomless coffee. Josh had been coming here since he was a kid. It was neutral ground, safe. We slid into a booth, and a waitress who'd been working there for 20 years recognized us immediately. Deborah, Josh, haven't seen you two together in ages. What can I get you? 2 coffees, Martha. Thanks. When she left, Josh leaned back against the booth and rubbed his face. I need you to explain something to me. Why the secrecy? About the money, I mean. I'm your son. Why didn't you ever tell me how much you actually have? This was the conversation I'd been dreading, and also the one we needed to have. Do you remember when you were 8 and your friend Tommy found out his dad had won the lottery? Yeah, Tommy's whole family changed. People started treating them differently. And within 2 years, they'd lost it all. Bad investments, greedy relatives, friends asking for handouts. Money changes relationships, Josh. It makes people see you differently. I didn't want that for us. But I'm your son. You could have trusted me. I did trust you. I just didn't want you to feel obligated to me because of money. When you started your own business, you did it with your own loans, your own credit. You built something yourself. If you'd known I could have just written a check, would you have worked as hard? He thought about it. Probably not. Exactly. I wanted you to be your own person, not Deborah Mitchell's wealthy son. Just Josh. Martha brought our coffee, and we sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing. Amelia called, Josh said, looking at his phone. 7 times. Are you going to answer? I don't know what to say. Do you love her? I thought I did, but I keep replaying tonight in my head. The way her parents talk to you. The way she just let them. She didn't defend you once. Some people are conflict avoidant. That doesn't necessarily make them bad. Josh looked at me sharply. Are you defending her now, after what you just did? I'm playing devil's advocate. You need to make this decision with clear eyes, not angry ones. He sipped his coffee, thinking. Her dad called me too, left a voicemail, said you're mentally unstable and I should consider a conservatorship. I actually laughed at that. A conservatorship. Because I outsmarted him, I must be crazy. Classic. He's threatening to sue you. Something about tortious interference with a business relationship. Let him try. I didn't interfere with anything. I simply declined to sell my property to him. That's my legal right. He also said he's going to make sure everyone in their social circle knows about your deception. Ruin your reputation. In Beverly Hills social circles, Josh, I don't have a reputation there because nobody knows who I am. That's the point. I'm invisible. And I like it that way. He smiled a little at that. You really did play them perfectly. I've had practice. Your father taught me well. Tell me about that, about how you and Dad built all this. So I told him about how his father Robert had started with one small commercial property, buying it with borrowed money and fixing it up himself. How we'd lived frugally for years, reinvesting everything. How we'd learned to see opportunities others missed. Your father had a saying, peacocks attract predators, pigeons survive. We decided to be pigeons. But you're not poor, Mom. You're not even close. No, but I live like I am, because wealth isn't about what you spend. It's about what you keep, about the security you build, the options you have. Options like refusing to sell land to people who insult you? Exactly like that. Josh's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Amelia. He showed it to me. "Josh, please talk to me. I love you. Whatever my parents said or did, that's them, not me. We can work through this." "What should I do?" he asked. "What do you want to do?" I want to believe her, but I keep thinking, if we get married, I'm marrying into that family. Family dinners, holidays, them being grandparents to my kids someday. Can I live with that? Only you can answer that question. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Did you ever regret walking away from people? Choosing principles over relationships?" I thought about the question carefully. Sometimes, but I never regretted knowing the truth. Whatever you decide about Amelia, at least now you know who her family really is. You're making an informed choice. And if I choose to stay with her, then you do it with eyes wide open. You set boundaries, you protect yourself, and you never let them make you feel less than, the way they tried to make me feel tonight. We stayed at the diner for another hour, talking through scenarios, possibilities, futures. By the time we left, Josh seemed calmer, not decided, but clearer. In the parking lot, he hugged me. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "I'm effective. There's a difference." "Promise me something?" "What?" "If I do end up marrying someone, Amelia or anyone else, promise you'll give them a fair shot before going undercover again?" I smiled. "I promise, but I reserve the right to conduct reasonable due diligence." "Mom." "Fine, no more elaborate ruses, but I'm still running a background check." He laughed, and for the first time that night, it sounded genuine. As I drove home alone, I thought about what I'd done. Was it cruel? Maybe. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Because my son deserved to know the truth, and sometimes the only way to see truth is to create the right conditions for it to reveal itself. The Hendersons had revealed themselves tonight. What Josh chose to do with that information was up to him, but at least now he knew, and knowledge, as my Robert used to say, is the most valuable asset you can own. 3 days passed before Josh called me again. 3 days of silence that felt like 3 months. When my phone finally rang, I was in my garden, pulling weeds and trying not to obsess about whether I'd destroyed my son's happiness. "Can you meet me for lunch?" he asked. "Same diner? Noon?" "I'll be there." I arrived first, ordered coffee, and waited. Josh walked in looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes, the look of a man who hadn't slept well in days. "You look terrible," I said as he slid into the booth. "Thanks, Mom. Really helping." "What happened?" He ordered coffee, took a long drink, and then, "I spent the last 3 days with Amelia, really talking, about everything." "And?" "She wants to work things out. Says she's sorry about how her parents behaved. She claims she didn't realize how bad they were being because that's just normal for them." That's not exactly reassuring. "No, but she says she wants to be different, that she doesn't share their values. She wants us to have our own life, separate from her family." I waited. There was clearly more. "But here's the thing. After everything that happened, I asked her a hypothetical. I said, what if my mom really was poor? What if she really did live on Social Security and clip coupons? Would you still have wanted to marry me?" What did she say? She hesitated. Just for a second, but she hesitated. And then she said yes, but I could see it in her eyes. She was lying. My heart broke for him. This is the problem with tests. Sometimes you discover things you wish you didn't know. "I'm sorry, honey." "Don't be. You were right. I needed to know." He ran his hand through his hair. "I called off the engagement this morning." "How did she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Crying, begging, promising to change. But Mom, how do you change someone's core values? She's been raised to believe that wealth equals worth. That's not something you can just decide to stop believing." "No, it's not. Her dad called me too. Threatened to sue me for breach of promise or some nonsense. Said I'd led Amelia on, wasted her time, damaged her reputation. There's no breach of promise claim in California. He's bluffing. I figured, but it doesn't matter. I'm done with that family." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Josh looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm angry at you, you know." "I know." Not for exposing them, for not trusting me, for not telling me about your money all these years, for treating me like I couldn't handle the truth. I nodded. You're right, I should have told you. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself, from the possibility that knowing about the money might change how you saw me. It wouldn't have. Are you sure? Think about every decision you've made in your adult life. Starting your business, taking out loans, struggling. Would you have made the same choices if you'd known I could write a check to solve any problem? He was quiet for a moment. Probably not, but that should have been my choice to make. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. Martha refilled our coffees, sensing the heavy conversation and giving us space. So what now? Josh asked. Are you going to tell me exactly how much you're worth? Break down every asset? Do you want to know? He thought about it. Not really. I just want to know that you trust me enough to tell me if I ask. I do, and I will. Ask me anything. Okay, the old Willow parcel. Are you really going to hold it just to spite the Hendersons? No, I'm holding it because it's good business, but I'll admit the spite is a nice bonus. He smiled a little at that. What are you going to do with it? I have a few options. There's a conservation trust interested in it. They want to keep it as open space, protect the creek. They can't pay $10 million, but they're offering $7 million plus a substantial tax write-off. That sounds like less money. In the short term, but the tax benefits over the next 10 years actually make it more profitable. Plus, I like the idea of that land staying wild. Your father and I used to hike there when we were young. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know. I'm happy to tell you now if you want to hear it. So I told him about the early years with his father, the risks we took, the properties we bought when everyone thought we were crazy, the times we almost went bankrupt, the times we struck gold, about the philosophy we developed, that true wealth isn't about showing off, it's about having choices, about security, about being able to say no to bad deals and bad people. Dad sounds like he was pretty smart, Josh said. He was, but he was also kind. He never would have treated someone the way the Hendersons treated me, no matter how poor they appeared. Is that why you tested them? Because you knew Dad wouldn't have approved of me marrying into a family like that? Partly, but mostly because I know what it's like to be dismissed because of assumptions. When your father and I started out, we'd go to banks for loans, and they'd see a young couple with more ambition than assets. They'd talk down to us, deny our applications, treat us like we were wasting their time. But you succeeded anyway. We did. But we never forgot how it felt to be underestimated. And I didn't want you to marry into a family that would make anyone feel that way. Josh's phone buzzed. He looked at it and sighed. Amelia again. She wants to meet, talk things through one more time. Are you going to? I don't think so. What's the point? The relationship is built on a foundation that cracked the moment it was tested. You can't build a life on that. That's very mature of you. I learned from watching you. You never settled. Not for bad deals, not for bad people, not for anything less than what you deserved. Your father would be proud of you. Would he be proud of you? For what you did? I thought about it. Probably not. He would have said I was too harsh, that I should have given them more benefit of the doubt. But he also would have understood why I did it. We finished our coffee and walked out to the parking lot together. Before getting in his car, Josh turned to me. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're my mom, even if you are a secret millionaire who goes undercover to test people. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're my son, even if you do make questionable choices in fiancés. He laughed. Fair. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in days. Yes, I'd ended my son's engagement. Yes, I'd made enemies of a wealthy family. Yes, I'd possibly been cruel. But Josh was free. Free from a relationship that would have suffocated him. Free from in-laws who would have controlled him. Free to find someone who loved him for who he was, not for what his family had. And sometimes, that's what love looks like. Not gentle and supportive, but fierce and protective. I'd been a pigeon most of my life, hiding in plain sight. But that night at the Henderson mansion, that night, I'd been a hawk, and it felt good. 2 weeks after Josh called off the engagement, I got a call from my attorney. "Deborah, we need to talk about the old Willow parcel." "What about it?" "The Henderson Group has filed a lawsuit. They're claiming you induced their business investment based on the reasonable expectation that the land would be available for sale." I actually laughed. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I never indicated the land was for sale. They approached me through intermediaries, and I declined every offer." "I know. It's a nuisance suit. They're hoping to pressure you into selling, or at least into a settlement. How do you want to handle it?" "Fight it. I'm not settling, and I'm certainly not selling to them now. It's going to cost legal fees. I don't care. Some principles are worth paying for." 3 days later, the story hit the local business news. Henderson Development sues anonymous landowner over stalled project. The article painted me as a mysterious figure blocking progress and economic development. The comments section was predictably divided. Half the people thought I was being unreasonable. The other half appreciated that someone was standing up to aggressive developers. But what really interested me was the email I received the day after the article came out. It was from Rebecca Winters, director of the Pacific Conservation Trust. We'd been in preliminary negotiations about the old Willow parcel, but talks had stalled when they couldn't meet my price point. "Ms. Mitchell, I read about the lawsuit. I wanted to reach out because I think we might be able to help each other." We met at a small cafe downtown. Rebecca was in her early 50s, dressed practically, with the enthusiastic energy of someone who genuinely loves their work. "I'll be direct," she said after we ordered. "We want your land. We've wanted it for 3 years. But we're a nonprofit. We can't compete with developers on price." "I know. That's why our previous negotiations didn't work out." "Right, but circumstances have changed. First, we've received a major donation earmarked specifically for land preservation in this area. Second, the publicity around the lawsuit has attracted other donors who want to see the Hendersons taken down a peg. Apparently, they've made a lot of enemies in the environmental community." I can imagine. "We can now offer $8 million. Plus, we'd be willing to name the preserved land after you or your late husband. The Mitchell Conservation Area, perhaps?" I considered it. The money was good, better than the Conservation Trust's previous offer. But the naming rights, that felt too visible, too peacock. "What if we named it after someone else?" I suggested. "What about the librarian who worked at the downtown branch for 40 years? She just retired. Or the teacher who founded the environmental education program at the local high school?" Rebecca's eyes lit up. "That would be perfect. Much better press for us, actually. Anonymous donor honors local heroes. People love that narrative." "Then we have a deal. $8 million, conservation easement in perpetuity, named after someone who actually earned the recognition." We shook hands. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said. "Why are you doing this? The Hendersons are offering more money." "Because some things matter more than maximum profit. That land has a creek where salmon still spawn. It has old-growth trees that are home to nesting birds. Once it's developed, all of that is gone forever." "But you held on to it for years. You could have sold it to conservation groups earlier." "I was waiting for the right price. I'm not a charity, Rebecca, but I'm also not a developer. There's a middle ground where good business and good values intersect. This is it." The deal closed 6 weeks later. The lawsuit from Henderson Development fell apart almost immediately. It was impossible to claim I'd induced their investment when I'd just sold the land to someone else for conservation. Mr. Henderson called me personally, which was a mistake on his part. "You did this to spite me," he said without preamble. "I did this because it was good business and the right thing to do. If that spites you in the process, that's a bonus, not the goal. You've cost us millions. The entire development is compromised without that land access. Then perhaps you should have been kinder to the woman you thought was a poor, confused widow. You never know who has the power to help or hurt you. This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Your lawsuit is dismissed. I've sold the land. You have no leverage. It's over, Mr. Henderson. You lost." He hung up on me. That evening, Josh came over for dinner. I made his favorite, pot roast with vegetables, the same recipe I'd been making since he was a kid. "So I heard you sold the old Willow parcel," he said, helping himself to seconds. "News travels fast." The Henderson Group is imploding. Apparently, losing that land killed their financing for the entire project. They're trying to find new investors, but the lawsuit made them look petty. Nobody wants to work with them. "That's unfortunate," I said, not feeling unfortunate about it at all. "Mom, come on. You planned this." "I planned to sell my land to someone who shared my values. If that had negative consequences for the Hendersons, that's correlation, not causation." He laughed. "You should have been a lawyer. Your father thought about law school, but he decided he liked building things more than arguing about them." "Speaking of building things," Josh said, his tone shifting slightly, "I wanted to talk to you about my business." "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, actually better than fine. We just landed a major contract. But to fulfill it, I need to expand, hire more people, get a bigger workspace, and that requires capital." "How much capital?" $200,000. I've been approved for a business loan, but the interest rate is high, 14%. It would eat into my profits significantly. I set down my fork. "And you want to borrow from me instead?" "At a better rate. I'd pay you back with interest, say 6%. It would save me money and make you money. Win-win." This was the conversation I'd been dreading for years. The moment when my son would ask for financial help, and I'd have to decide how to handle it without creating resentment or dependency. "Let me think about it," I said. "Mom, I'm not asking for a handout. This is a legitimate business opportunity. I have a business plan, projections, everything." "I know, and I believe in you, but I need to think about what's best for both of us." He looked hurt, but he nodded. "Okay, but don't take too long. I need to make a decision by the end of the month." After he left, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and thought about what my husband would do. Robert had always been better at this than me, the balance between helping and enabling, between support and smothering. Then I remembered something he'd told me years ago. The best help is the kind that makes someone stronger, not more dependent. I called Josh the next morning. "I'll give you the $200,000, I said, "but not as a loan." "Mom, I don't want a gift. Let me finish. I'll give it to you as an investment. I want 20% equity in your company." Silence. "You want to be a partner?" he asked finally. "A silent partner. You run the business, make all the decisions. I stay completely out of operations. But if the company succeeds, I succeed. And if it fails, we both learn an expensive lesson." That's brilliant. It means I'm invested in your success. It means you have accountability to someone other than yourself. And it means if you do build something valuable, I share in that value. And if I buy you out later, then we negotiate a fair price based on the company's valuation at that time. Standard startup equity arrangement. You've really thought about this. I've been thinking about it for 20 years. How to help you without hurting you. This seems like the right balance. We drew up the papers through my attorney. Josh's business partner was initially hesitant about bringing on an investor, but when he learned I was a silent partner who wouldn't interfere with operations, he agreed. 6 months later, Josh's company had doubled in size. The contract they'd landed led to 3 more. My $200,000 investment was looking very smart. But more importantly, Josh was building something himself, something he was proud of, something that belonged to him, not to me. That's the difference between help and harm, between support and control. The Hendersons had wanted to control Josh through money and status, to make him dependent on their approval and their wealth. I wanted to make him independent, strong, free. And sometimes the path to freedom requires a little bit of capital and a lot of trust. 6 months after the Old Willow parcel deal closed, I got an unexpected visitor at my house. I was in my garden, where I seem to spend most of my time these days, when a car pulled into my driveway. Not a fancy car, a sensible Honda Accord. The door opened and out stepped Amelia Henderson. I stood up slowly, pulling off my gardening gloves. "This is a surprise." She looked different than the last time I'd seen her, less polished. Her hair was in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater. No designer labels visible anywhere. "I hope you don't mind me coming by. I got your address from Josh." "He gave it to you?" "After I asked him 3 times and promised I wasn't coming to yell at you." I gestured to my porch. "Would you like some iced tea?" We sat in the rocking chairs I'd had since Josh was a baby, the same chairs where Robert and I used to sit and talk about our dreams, our plans, our life. "I've been thinking about that dinner," Amelia said, "the one where you pretended to be poor." "I didn't pretend to be poor. I just didn't advertise being wealthy." "Semantics. You deliberately misled us." "Your parents deliberately insulted me. I'd say we're even." She smiled a little at that. "Fair point, but I wanted you to know I'm not them. You sat there while they insulted me. You said nothing." "I know, and I've regretted it every day since. That's why I'm here, to apologize." I studied her, trying to determine if this was genuine or just another attempt to win Josh back. "Why now? Josh ended the engagement months ago." "Because I finally understand what you were testing. You wanted to see if we were good people when there was nothing to gain from being good. And we failed. Spectacularly." "Yes, you did." "My parents are furious at me," she continued. "I moved out, got my own apartment, a small 1-bedroom in a regular neighborhood. No doorman, no valet parking, just normal." "Why?" "Because I realized I didn't know who I was without their money, without their status. I've spent my whole life being Amelia Henderson, daughter of the Henderson Group. I wanted to find out who I'd be if I was just Amelia." "That's very philosophical." "I got a job, a real job. I'm working at a nonprofit that helps first-generation college students navigate financial aid. It pays $42,000 a year. My parents think I've lost my mind." "Have you?" She laughed. "Maybe, but for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters, something that helps people who actually need help." We rocked in silence for a moment, the chains of our chairs creaking in rhythm. "I'm not here to try to win Josh back," Amelia said. "I know that's over. I hurt him. I hurt you. I don't deserve another chance." "Then why are you here?" "Because I wanted you to know that what you did that night, as humiliating as it was, it changed me. You held up a mirror and forced me to see who I'd become, someone I didn't like very much. And now? Now I'm trying to be better, to do better. My parents think I'm having a quarter-life crisis, but really, I'm just waking up." I poured us both more tea, considering her words. "You know what the worst part was?" Amelia continued. "After that dinner, after Josh broke things off, I told my parents what happened, and they didn't understand why I was upset. They genuinely believed they'd been kind to you, welcoming even. They thought offering you money was generous. People rarely see their own cruelty." "No, they don't, and I didn't want to become them." "What did your parents say when you moved out?" "That I was throwing away my future, that I'd come crawling back when I realized how hard the real world is, that I'd been brainwashed by your stunt." "It wasn't a stunt. It was a test." "I know, and I failed it, but I'm taking a do-over, even if nobody's watching this time." Something in her voice made me believe her. Maybe it was the fact that she'd come here with no agenda, no ask, just an apology and an explanation. "Can I show you something?" I asked. I led her into my house, my modest, comfortable house with its worn furniture and family photos on every surface. I showed her the study where I manage my properties, the filing cabinets full of decades of careful business decisions, the desk where Robert used to work late into the night, teaching himself real estate law from library books. "This is where wealth actually lives," I said, "not in mansions and designer clothes, in boring paperwork and careful decisions and delayed gratification. It's not very glamorous." "No, but it's real, and it lasts." I pulled out a photo album, an actual physical album, the kind nobody makes anymore. Pictures of Robert and me in our 20s, standing in front of our first property, young and hopeful and terrified. "We weren't born wealthy," I said. "We built it, one property at a time, one good decision after another, and we stayed invisible because we learned that peacocks attract predators. Josh told me that phrase, peacocks attract predators. It's brilliant. It's survival. The flashiest people in the room are usually the most vulnerable. Amelia looked through the album, asking questions about each property, each decision, each risk we'd taken. My parents do everything differently, she said. They leverage everything, borrow against everything. They're always expanding, always reaching for bigger deals. That's why they're overextended, why they needed the old Willow parcel so badly. They've built a house of cards, and any strong wind could knock it down. Is that going to happen? Are they going to lose everything? I don't know, but it's possible. Would that make you happy, after how they treated you? I thought about it honestly. No, I don't wish financial ruin on anyone, but I also don't feel obligated to save them from their own poor decisions. We talked for another hour about business, about values, about the difference between wealth and worth. When she left, she turned back at her car. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for the tea and for not slamming the door in my face. You took responsibility. You're trying to change. That deserves acknowledgement. Can I ask you something? If I had stood up for you that night, if I had told my parents to stop being cruel, would you have approved of me then? Honestly, I don't know, but it would have been a start. She nodded and drove away. I called Josh that evening. Amelia came by today. I know, she asked if it was okay first. Was it weird? Surprisingly not. I think she's actually changing. Does that mean you think I should give her another chance? No, that's not my decision to make. But I think she's going to be okay, with or without you. Good, she deserves to be okay. So do you, honey. I am okay, Mom. Better than okay, actually. The business is doing great. I met someone new. Nothing serious yet, but she's kind and funny, and she thinks my dented Camry is charming. Sounds promising. And Mom, thanks for caring enough to run that test, for protecting me even when it hurt. That's what parents do, even the secretly wealthy ones. He laughed. Still can't believe you pulled that off. Neither can I, honestly, but I'm glad I did. After we hung up, I sat on my porch as the sun set, thinking about masks and tests and truth. The Hendersons had shown me their true selves when they thought I was powerless. Amelia was discovering her true self without her parents' money to define her. And Josh was building his true self, independent of both my wealth and the Hendersons' influence. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable, even when it ends relationships. Because a relationship built on false premises is just a beautiful lie, and lies, no matter how beautiful, eventually crumble. Truth lasts. 1 year after that infamous dinner, I was back at the same diner with Josh, but this time we had company. Her name was Sarah. She was a veterinarian with student loan debt, a practical SUV with dog hair on the seats, and a laugh that sounded like pure joy. Josh had been dating her for 8 months, and I'd never seen him happier. So, Sarah said, stirring her coffee nervously, Josh told me about the dinner. The one where you went undercover. I glanced at my son. Did he now? Every detail, including the part where you revealed you own half the commercial real estate in the county. That's an exaggeration. Quarter of the commercial real estate? Closer to truth. She laughed. I'm not going to lie, Mrs. Mitchell. It's intimidating, meeting you, knowing that you're evaluating whether I'm good enough for your son. I'm not. Yes, you are. And you should be. He's amazing. He deserves someone who sees that. I liked her immediately. Tell me, I said, if I were actually broke, living on Social Security, clipping coupons, would you still be here? She didn't hesitate. Yes, because I'm not dating Josh's family finances. I'm dating Josh. Although I'll admit, the old Camry should probably be retired. That thing's a safety hazard. Josh laughed. See, Mom, even Sarah thinks you should get a new car. The Camry runs fine. The Camry has 200,000 miles and makes a noise like a dying whale when you turn left. Character, I insisted. We ordered lunch. regular diner food, nothing fancy, and talked about their plans. Josh's business was thriving. They were thinking about moving in together. Sarah was considering opening her own veterinary practice. "I'd need a business loan," Sarah said, "but the interest rates are brutal." Josh suggested talking to you about investment opportunities. I raised an eyebrow at my son. Did he now? "Strictly business, Mom. I told her you sometimes invest in startups, that you do your due diligence and make smart decisions. If her business plan is solid, maybe you'd be interested. Or maybe," I said carefully, "you two could figure it out yourselves, build something without my involvement." Sarah looked relieved. "Actually, that would be better. Not that I don't appreciate the offer, I do. But Josh told me how he felt when he found out about your wealth. Like maybe his accomplishments didn't fully belong to him because you could have helped any time." "Exactly," Josh said. "So we'll do this ourselves," Sarah continued. "Get traditional financing, build the practice from the ground up. And if we fail, we fail. But it'll be our failure, not yours." Smart woman. "However," I said, "if you ever need advice about business planning, financing options, commercial real estate for the practice, I'm happy to share what I've learned." "That would be amazing. Thank you." After lunch, Josh walked Sarah to her car. I watched them through the diner window, the easy affection, the natural comfort, the genuine partnership. This was different from Amelia. This was real. Josh came back and slid into the booth. "So, verdict? I like her. But are you going to test her? Show up somewhere in disguise, see if she's secretly judgmental?" "No, I trust your judgment now. You learned the lesson. You won't make the same mistake twice." "You really put me through it, though." "I did, and I'd do it again, but I won't need to. You're not that naive kid anymore." "Thanks to you." "Thanks to experience. I just provided the experience." My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca at the Conservation Trust. "Thought you'd want to know. The Mitchell Conservation Area opens to the public next month. We're having a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Hope you'll come." I showed Josh. "They named it after Dad?" "No, we named it after Mrs. Chen, the librarian. But people keep calling it the Mitchell Conservation Area anyway. The press likes the story of the anonymous wealthy widow who chose conservation over profit." "You really hate publicity." "I really do." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Josh asked, "Do you ever regret it? Staying invisible all these years?" "Sometimes. There are benefits to being visible. Influence, recognition, the ability to affect change openly. But I've seen what visibility does to people. It changes them, makes them perform instead of live. Your father and I chose authenticity over applause. I don't regret that." "Even if it meant people like the Hendersons underestimated you?" "Especially then. Being underestimated is a superpower, Josh. It lets you see who people really are. It gives you information they'd never willingly share." "You're kind of terrifying, you know that?" "You've mentioned that before." A few months later, I got a wedding invitation. Not from Josh. He and Sarah were taking things slow, which I respected. This invitation was from Amelia. She was marrying a public school teacher named Marcus. The wedding was at a community center, not a country club. The invitation was simple cardstock, not embossed luxury paper. I almost didn't go, but something made me RSVP yes. The wedding was lovely, small, intimate, focused on the couple rather than on impressing guests. Amelia's parents were there, looking uncomfortable in the decidedly unglamorous venue. But Amelia looked radiant. She spotted me during the reception and came over. "You came. I didn't think you would." "I wanted to see if you were really committed to this new path." "And?" "You look happy. That's either a very good performance or genuine change." "It's genuine. Marcus and I met at the nonprofit. He teaches at an underfunded middle school. He has student loans he'll be paying off for 20 more years. And he's the best person I've ever met." "Your parents don't approve?" "They think I'm settling. They don't understand that I'm actually reaching for something real." Mrs. Henderson approached, saw me, and actually flinched. "Mrs. Mitchell, I didn't expect to see you here." Amelia was kind enough to invite me. "Yes, well, I suppose bygones should be bygones." She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge what she'd done. but I hadn't expected her to. People like Mrs. Henderson rarely admit fault. "How's the business?" I asked Mr. Henderson, who had joined his wife. "Recovering. We had to scale back on several projects, restructure our debt. It's been challenging." "But you're still operating?" "For now, though I'll admit losing the old Willow parcel cost us significantly. It cost you the opportunity to develop that land, but it gave the community a natural preserve. Different costs, different benefits." He looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "Yes, well, congratulations to Amelia, I suppose." They drifted away, and I spent the rest of the evening watching Amelia and Marcus celebrate their marriage, surrounded by teachers, social workers, nonprofit employees, people who did meaningful work for modest pay. It was the opposite of the Henderson mansion, and it was beautiful. On my way out, Amelia stopped me. "Thank you for coming, and thank you for that dinner, even though it was painful. I needed to see who I was becoming before it was too late." "You're welcome, and Amelia, I'm proud of you." Her eyes filled with tears. "That means more than you know." I drove home in my ancient Camry, which really did need to be retired, but I'd grown attached to it, and thought about masks and truth and the long arc of change. I'd gone to that dinner a year ago, intending to expose a family's cruelty, but I'd accidentally set in motion something bigger: Amelia's transformation, Josh's clarity, my own reckoning with how I'd handled my wealth and my son's life. Sometimes we test others and end up testing ourselves. The old Willow parcel is now protected land. Josh's business is thriving. Amelia found herself. And I learned that wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in integrity, relationships, and the courage to stay true to your values, even when it costs you. 6 months later, Josh proposed to Sarah. They got married at that same diner where we'd had so many important conversations. The owner let them use the space after hours. 50 guests, simple food, genuine joy. I wore a dress from Target and my comfortable shoes. Sarah's parents wore their Sunday best. Nobody cared about labels or status or money. During his speech, Josh said, "My mom taught me that wealth is about choices, not stuff, about having the freedom to say no to bad deals and bad people, about building something real that lasts." He raised his glass. To choices, to freedom, to things that last. Everyone drank to that. As I sat there in my discount dress, surrounded by real love and real people, I thought about the Hendersons in their mansion, probably preparing for another ostentatious event with people they didn't really like. I thought about the old saying, "Better to be a live dog than a dead lion." I'd spent my life being a pigeon, unremarkable and underestimated. And I wouldn't change a thing, because peacocks attract predators, but pigeons survive. And survival with integrity intact is the ultimate wealth.